There is a moment in the history of the Cold War that most Americans have never heard of, and it may be one of the greatest intelligence victories this country has ever achieved. Not won through billions of dollars in secret programs, not won through years of careful espionage, not won through the work of seasoned CIA operatives. It was handed to America by a 21-year-old kid from North Korea who made a decision one quiet morning in September 1953, climbed into the cockpit of the most feared fighter jet in the communist world, and flew it straight into American hands. For years, the Soviet Union had terrorized the skies over Korea with a machine that American engineers could only dream about examining up close. They had built their intelligence reports from second-hand accounts, from the nervous debriefs of surviving pilots, from blurry photographs taken at dangerous distances. The MiG-15 was a ghost, fast, deadly, and completely unknown on the inside. American pilots were fighting it every single day and still didn't fully understand what they were up against. The United States Air Force was so desperate to get their hands on one that they printed millions of leaflets and dropped them over enemy territory, promising $100,000 to any communist pilot willing to make the crossing. Nobody came. The operation was quietly written off as a failure, and then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. His name was No Kum-Sok. He was born in 1932 in the northern part of Korea, a land that by the time he came of age had been occupied, divided and handed over to one of the most brutal regimes the 20th century had ever produced. His childhood was shaped by the Japanese colonial occupation, where he was forced to take a Japanese name and told that his own identity was something to be ashamed of. When the war ended and the Soviets moved into the north, one form of control simply replaced another. The Kim Il-sung regime demanded absolute loyalty, not just in action, but in thought, in speech, in the expression on your face when the party's name was mentioned. No had been raised in a Christian household. His early education came from a Catholic mission school, and despite everything the regime tried to pour into him, the slogans, the propaganda, the ritual hatred of the West, something inside him never fully surrendered. He learned to perform loyalty perfectly. He shouted the right slogans, wore the right uniform, said the right things to the right people. But underneath all of it, he carried a quiet and dangerous secret. He admired the West, and in North Korea, that was enough to get you killed. By 1951, at just 19 years old, he had become the youngest pilot in the North Korean Air Force. He was trained in Manchuria by Soviet instructors who were technically some of the best aviators in the communist world. He flew combat missions. He learned the MiG-15 the way you learn something when your life depends on it. Completely, obsessively, down to every sound the engine made and every vibration in the stick. By the time he made his decision, he had flown over 100 operational sorties. He was not a scared kid making a reckless gamble. He was a trained, experienced military pilot who had spent years calculating the odds and waiting for exactly the right moment. The Korean War armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. The shooting stopped, and No Kum-Sok began to plan. The plan had no room for error. One wrong move, a suspicious conversation overheard by the wrong person, a hesitation noticed by a political officer, a route deviation picked up by ground radar, and he was dead. Not imprisoned, not interrogated, dead. The North Korean regime did not treat defectors with paperwork. They made examples of them in ways designed to ensure nobody ever tried again. No later told an interviewer that he figured he had a 20% chance of success. He said he thought that was good enough. Think about what that means for a moment. This man sat with the full knowledge that he was 4 times more likely to fail than to survive, and he decided the life waiting on the other side was worth those odds. That is not recklessness. That is the kind of desperation that only comes from living inside a system so suffocating that death starts to look like a reasonable alternative to another day of it. On the morning of September 21st, 1953, he was assigned a routine flight from Sunan Air Base, just outside Pyongyang. He completed his pre-flight checks. He climbed into the cockpit. He looked at the photograph of Kim Il-sung that was mounted inside every North Korean aircraft as a reminder of who owned the sky. And he made a choice. He pointed the nose of his MiG-15 south, pushed the throttle forward, and did not look back. The entire crossing took 17 minutes. The MiG reached over 1,000 kilometers per hour. 17 minutes between one life and another, between a country that wanted him dead and a world he had only ever dreamed about. He flew low to avoid detection. He crossed the demilitarized zone alone, with no escort, no communication, and no guarantee that the Americans on the other side wouldn't simply shoot him out of the sky before he could explain himself. He was not chased by North Korean aircraft. He had taken off before anyone realized what he was doing, and the American radar near Kimpo Air Base had been temporarily shut down that morning for routine maintenance. The sky was empty. The runway was waiting. What happened next is the kind of scene that belongs in a movie, except it actually happened, and no Hollywood writer would dare make it this chaotic. Kimpo Air Base was buzzing with routine activity that morning. F-86 Sabres were landing and taking off on scheduled drills. Nobody was watching for anything unusual. Then, coming from exactly the wrong direction, from the north, opposite to all the American traffic, a jet appeared on final approach. It wasn't moving like a Sabre. The profile was wrong. The markings were wrong. No had come in from the wrong side of the runway and was heading directly toward an F-86 Sabre landing from the opposite direction. The American pilot, Captain Dave William, veered violently out of the way and shouted over the radio, "It's a goddamn MiG!" Another pilot, circling overhead, later said that if No had tried to approach from the correct direction, he would have been spotted earlier and almost certainly shot down before he reached the runway. The mistake that could have killed him was the same mistake that saved his life. Pilots who had been waiting by their aircraft jumped into their cockpits and trained their guns on the MiG as it taxied to a stop between 2 parked Sabres. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody had a protocol for this. The air base had never seen anything like it. Armed guards approached with weapons drawn, fingers tight on their triggers, waiting for some signal that would tell them what to do next. No Kum-Sok opened the canopy. He climbed out of the cockpit of the Soviet Union's most advanced fighter jet. He tore up the photograph of Kim Il-sung that had been placed inside the cockpit and threw the pieces to the ground. Then he raised his hands above his head. The guards stared at him. He stared back, and slowly, one by one, the guns came down. The Americans moved fast. The MiG was rolled into a secured hangar within the hour. Military police confiscated every camera in the vicinity, though one Australian photographer managed to hide his and captured the only photograph taken of the jet in those first chaotic minutes, sitting on the runway between 2 Sabres like something that had landed from another world. Which, in a sense, it had. No was flown by helicopter to a 5th Air Force intelligence facility outside Seoul, then transferred to Okinawa, where he spent the next 7 months in debriefings that ran close to 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. He told them everything. The structure of the North Korean Air Force, the Soviet advisors embedded in their units, the tactics they were trained to use, the weaknesses in their own systems that pilots were never allowed to discuss. For years, American intelligence had been building a picture of the enemy from fragments and guesswork. No Kum-Sok handed them the complete image in a single morning. But the real prize was the aircraft itself. The MiG was dismantled, disguised under US Air Force markings, and shipped to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. And there, the United States Air Force called in the most qualified man they had. The pilot who had already broken the sound barrier and proved that American aviation was operating on a level the rest of the world hadn't reached yet. His name was Major Chuck Yeager. Yeager later said that flying the MiG-15 was the most demanding situation he had ever faced. He called it a quirky airplane that had killed a lot of its pilots. And Yeager was not a man who said things like that lightly. But what the 11 days of testing revealed was more important than any single pilot's opinion. The MiG-15 was a reasonably capable fighter, but it lacked the technological sophistication of American aircraft. Yeager pushed it to 0.98 Mach before it became dangerously uncontrollable. The aircraft suffered from oscillation problems, poor pressurization, unexpected pitch-up at high speeds, unrecoverable spins, sudden stalls, and a particularly dangerous emergency fuel pump that could cause the aircraft to explode if improperly activated. The Soviets had built a machine that looked terrifying from the outside. When the Americans finally took it apart and flew it to its limits, they found something that must have been deeply satisfying to every engineer and pilot who had spent years fighting it. The F-86 Sabre was better. American pilots had been winning the air war over Korea, not by luck, not by accident, but because America had built the superior aircraft. As one officer put it after reviewing Yeager's test results, "Because of him, we now know more about this airplane than the Russians do." No Kum-Sok arrived in the United States in 1954. He had never heard of Operation Moolah. He had never seen the leaflets. He had never been motivated by money, by politics, or by anything the American government had done to try to bring a pilot across the line. He had made his decision alone, in the dark, with a 20% chance of survival, because he believed in something that no regime had been able to fully take from him. The idea that there was a better life waiting on the other side, and that it was worth dying to reach. He was granted an audience with Vice President Richard Nixon. He was made an American citizen through a special bill signed by President Eisenhower himself. He used his $100,000 reward to support his mother and put himself through university, earning degrees in mechanical and electrical engineering. He went on to work as an aeronautical engineer for Boeing, General Electric, DuPont, Lockheed, and Westinghouse. The boy who had been forced to fly for Kim Il-sung spent his career building things for the country he had chosen. Chuck Yeager, the man who had pushed No's MiG to its breaking point over Okinawa, became one of his closest friends. When Yeager visited Embry-Riddle in 1987 to receive an honorary doctorate, he stayed at No's home. Two men from opposite ends of the Cold War sitting at the same kitchen table in Florida, decades after the moment that had brought them together. Back in North Korea, 5 of No's comrades and commanders were executed in retaliation for his defection. Among them was his best friend, Lieutenant Kun Soo-sung. The fate of his uncle and the rest of his family in the north has never been confirmed. No carried that weight for the rest of his life. He never pretended that freedom came without a cost, but he also never regretted the crossing. No Kum-Sok, who spent his last decades as Kenneth H. Rowe, American citizen, engineer, husband, father, died on December 26, 2022 in Daytona Beach, Florida. He was 90 years old. The MiG-15 he flew across the line that September morning is still on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. You can go see it today. You can stand in front of it and think about the 21-year-old who climbed out of that cockpit with his hands in the air in front of 100 armed Americans, with nothing but the belief that this country was worth the risk. He was right. This is Declassified Vault. Every week we open another file. Subscribe and make sure you don't miss the next one.